Throughout history, climate has profoundly shaped life and Earth. It hasn't just carved the landscapes we see, but has also influenced the forms, cultures, behaviors, and temperaments of civilizations. This is a tale of climate's power to shape lands, lives, and destinies. Picture a world where the sun's warmth transforms barren lands into fertile fields, bringing life to forgotten corners. A world where rivers hum with trade and villages overflow with laughter and song. This was the 10th century, a time of abundance, hope, and endless possibility. Increased solar activity ushered in an era of warmth and prosperity across the world. This period, now known as the Medieval Climate Optimum, saw thriving communities, flourishing trade, and expanded human settlements. But 4 centuries later, the sun's activity began a dramatic reversal. A new cycle emerged, plunging the world into what we now call the Little Ice Age. Temperatures dropped significantly, altering ecosystems and human livelihoods. As this cold period began, humanity faced one of its darkest chapters, the Black Death. This devastating pandemic swept across continents, leaving an indelible mark on history as climate and catastrophe intertwined in the story of Earth's past. In China, terrible droughts, followed by torrential rains and floods, devastate the land. Famines ensue, and the Ming dynasty ends up collapsing, making way for the Qing dynasty, which will rule until 1912. But Europe was the most impacted by the deadly pandemic. Why Europe? If you're thinking about the climate, you're absolutely right. But before Europe, let's see what happens in Morocco. In 1347, a terrifying variant of the plague arrived from the east. It claimed more than half the population in some countries. When the Black Death struck Morocco, it caused significant population decline, disrupting social structures and economic activities. While precise figures are unavailable, it's estimated that the pandemic could have reduced Morocco's population by 25 to 60%, similar to the devastating impact seen in Europe. The loss of life disrupted families, communities, and the workforce. Agricultural production declined as farmers succumbed to the disease, leading to food shortages and economic instability. Trade routes were also disrupted as movement of people and goods was restricted to contain the spread of the plague. Moroccans adapted. One word was on all mouths: decentralization. To prevent people from traveling, each city established its own hospital and even a psychiatric asylum. And in Fez, an anecdote left a lasting impression on history. One day, the entire city gathered, fascinated by a scene. A doctor treating a stork, cotton, plaster, alcohol. An extraordinary sight for the time. The human, as any physical object, is ruled by inertia principle. He doesn't want to move, and when pushed, he doesn't want to stop. But here, in North Africa, it stopped there. The mild climate eased the necessities of life. As a Moroccan proverb says, the year is long for the one who wants to work. In Europe, it was a different story. There, winters are unforgiving. Those who don't prepare don't see the spring. Perhaps this is the origin of the stereotype. Europeans are punctual, rigorous, and rule breakers. Each people of those dark times bore the weight of a heavy cultural and traditional heritage, nearly immutable. But when faced with a force majeure, everything can shift. Europe, devastated by the Black Death, underwent profound transformations. This decade of darkness, marked by death and despair, triggered what would become one of humanity's most fundamental revolutions, the technical revolution. At the start of the pandemic, Europeans naturally turned to the church. But the church, weakened by its exile in Avignon following a conflict with the French kings, had no answers to what seemed like the apocalypse. Thus began the first cracks in the foundation of religious authority. Where faith failed, a new path emerged, the path of ingenuity and soon scientific inquiry. Winter arrived. The streets were littered with corpses. People were confined, unable to travel to solve their problems. They had no choice. They had to learn to survive on their own. Europe awakened. Artisans proliferated. Everyone became a bit of a blacksmith, carpenter, doctor, or rope maker. Working metal, wood, fabric, ropes, and even gunpowder. New techniques emerged, driven by necessity and freed from the shackles of tradition. And this transformation was unstoppable. But in crises, it's not only survival. Fortunes are also made. When the plague subsided and the dark decade ended, these people, enriched by newfound skills and a newfound sense of self-reliance, sought to escape. Far from the Silk Roads, where the pandemic had come from, far from the East, where the Ottomans were gaining power, they headed west, as far as they could, to the shores of the Sea of Darkness. There, the Iberian Peninsula had changed. The old kingdoms of Leon, Aragon, and Navarre gave way to new powers, Castile and the young kingdom of Portugal. It was here, in this little-known Portugal, that it all began. The kingdom emerged, enriched by the ingenuity of its people and fueled by the ambition born from adversity. The reconquest of Andalusia opened new opportunities. But it still lacked one thing, just one, the chance to change the world. The Silk Road, once the main artery of global trade, began to lose its prominence after the Black Death. In its place, a smaller route emerged timidly, the maritime route of the North Sea. This route, harsh and demanding, required ships more robust and better designed than those of the Mediterranean. Once, the Vikings terrorized the Iberian coasts in their longships. Now, with the rise of stable northern European kingdoms, they had transformed into Christian merchants. This shift offered Portugal a unique opportunity. The young kingdom, still striving for identity and independence from Castile, seized this chance. By investing in unprecedented naval innovations, it revolutionized the art of navigation, establishing maritime supremacy that would last nearly 2 centuries. The ports of Lisbon and Lagos were redeveloped to accommodate an expanding fleet. Under the leadership of Prince Henry the Navigator, Portugal became a beacon of exploration. At the naval school of Sagres, sailors, cartographers, and inventors gathered to refine their techniques. From these efforts emerged a masterpiece, the caravel. This ship combined agility with strength. With it, Portugal pushed the boundaries of exploration, rounding Africa, opening the route to India, and later establishing trade posts in Goa, Macau, and the Moluccas. The spice route became the rival sister of the Silk Road, and Portugal, like a skilled football player dribbling through defenses, established itself as an indispensable actor in global trade. However, this maritime epic was only a prelude to an even deeper transformation. With the Renaissance, the West embarked on a relentless race for knowledge. While other civilizations relied on millennia-old traditions, Europe broke free from the chains of the past to venture into the unknown. Figures like Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, and Newton didn't merely follow existing paths, they blazed new trails. They weren't running to catch up with other civilizations, they were taking a decisive lead. This unprecedented and rapid progress made science the driving force of the West. While other cultures watched, fascinated and overwhelmed, Europe was building observatories, academies, and universities, transforming ideas into enduring institutions. Each discovery, from gravity to optics, from mathematics to astronomy, widened the gap between the West and the rest of the world. Europe wasn't just running. It was racing ahead in a victorious breakout, laying the foundation of modern science. In this race, the West redefined the rules. It was no longer merely about the pursuit of wealth or power, but a leap toward understanding universal laws, a relentless chase of the infinite. Portugal had opened the world. Europe, driven by science, was now poised to dominate it. Meanwhile, Morocco, weakened under the Marinid dynasty, faced monumental challenges. Isolated between two giants, the Ottoman Empire and the emerging European powers, it fought relentlessly to preserve its sovereignty. Thus began a new era, one where Morocco, standing alone, battled on multiple fronts. It was a time marked by bloody battles, uncertain alliances, and internal revolts. But that is another story. Upon discovering the Sea of Darkness, the Europeans did not name it Oceanica Portuguesa or Oceanica Española. Instead, they chose another name, Oceanica Atlantica. This symbolic and universal choice implicitly placed a target on Morocco's back. Those lands, which were once the end of the world, and for some, the land of Atlantide, are then an important stage in the route of the New World to discover. From that moment, Morocco was drawn into a spiral of conflicts to defend its territory and, above all, the Moroccan Sahara. It marked the beginning of a fierce struggle that would last 5 centuries and continues to shape its history today. Meanwhile, the lands between Morocco and Egypt, once thriving trade routes, found themselves sidelined, far from the main axes of commerce. In this region, local bandits and warlords, deprived of opportunities, turned against their own people. These areas, resistant to Turkish influence for a time, eventually fell under Ottoman rule. Amid this new era of maritime conflicts, the cities of Algiers and Tunis called for help. The Ottoman Sultan responded by sending 2 legendary navigators, the Barbarossa brothers. These formidable corsairs established a new order in the region, turning the coasts into strategic strongholds of the Ottoman Empire for the looming maritime conflicts. We have explored how climate change has shaped the course of history. The Little Ice Age, which lasted until the 19th century, gave way to a new warm era marked by a more active sun, an era that continues to this day. Today we face rising temperatures. Is it entirely our doing, or are we still at the mercy of the sun's cycles? History may hold the answers, something to ponder.